Captain Jake Morrison stared at the view screen as his ship drifted through the dark void of space. The readings on his instruments made no sense. Something big was out there, something that should not exist in this empty region between star systems. He turned to his science officer, a woman with short brown hair and tired eyes from too many hours studying data. "Lisa, are you sure about these energy readings?" Jake asked. Dr. Lisa Carter looked up from her console and nodded. "The signals are definitely artificial, Captain. Whatever is out there, someone built it." Jake had been commanding the exploration, vessel UNS Horizon, for 3 years. His crew of 45 had mapped dozens of new star systems and found plenty of dead worlds. But they had never found anything like this. The energy signature was massive, bigger than any human structure ever built. "Ben, take us in slowly," Jake ordered his security chief. "Keep weapons ready but not targeted. We don't know what we're dealing with." Ben Rodriguez was a big man with steady hands and a calm voice. He had served with Jake for 5 years and never questioned an order. "Moving in at quarter speed, Captain. All weapons are on standby." As the horizon moved closer, the thing became visible on their screens. It was enormous, easily 10 times the size of their ship. The structure looked like it was made of dark crystal that reflected their lights in strange patterns. It had no engines that they could see, no weapons, no signs of life. "Amy, are you picking up any signals?" Jake asked his communications officer. Amy Walsh shook her head. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and she wore the focused expression she always had when listening to the void. "Nothing, Captain. No radio signals, no distress calls, nothing at all." Jake studied the alien structure on his screen. It was beautiful in a cold way, like a giant piece of jewelry floating in space. But something about it made him uneasy. Why was it here, so far from any star system? Why was it completely dark and silent? "Lisa, can you tell what it's made of?" he asked. "The hull appears to be some kind of crystalline material," Lisa replied, her fingers dancing over her controls. "I'm reading massive power sources inside, but they're all in standby mode. It's like the whole thing is sleeping." Jake made his decision. "We're going aboard. Ben, prepare a boarding party. Amy, send a message back to Earth Command. Tell them what we found." An hour later, Jake led a team of 6 people through the airlocks of the alien ship. Their boots echoed in the empty corridors as they moved deeper into the structure. The walls were smooth and dark, lined with what looked like windows or viewing ports. Jake shined his light through one and saw something that made him stop breathing. "My God," whispered Lisa, who was looking through another window. "There are thousands of them." The chamber beyond the windows was filled with rows of metal pods, each one containing a different alien creature. Jake could see beings with scales, others with fur, some that looked almost human but with different colored skin. All of them were floating in some kind of liquid, apparently asleep. "It's a prison ship," Ben said quietly. "These are all prisoners." They moved through corridor after corridor, finding more chambers filled with sleeping aliens. Jake counted at least 20 different species, all from different worlds. Someone had collected them from across the galaxy and brought them here. At the center of the ship, they found a different kind of chamber. This one was smaller and heavily reinforced. Inside was a single pod, and inside that pod was a girl who looked almost human. She had pale blue skin and long silver hair that floated around her face. She appeared to be about 16 years old. "She's beautiful," Amy whispered. As if she had heard them, the girl's eyes opened. They were large and silver, like mirrors reflecting starlight. She looked directly at Jake through the window and smiled. Then she spoke, and her voice came through their helmet radios as clearly as if she was standing next to them. "Hello, Captain Morrison. I have been waiting for you." Jake stepped backward in surprise. How did she know his name? How was she speaking their language? How was her voice reaching them through the vacuum of space? "Don't be afraid," the girl continued. "My name is Zara. I need your help." Lisa was scanning the pod with her instruments. "Captain, she's not using any technology. The voice is coming directly from her." Jake stepped closer to the window. "How long have you been here?" 217 years, Zara replied. I was captured by the Dominion Empire when I was very young. They have kept me here because they fear what I can do." "What can you do?" Jake asked. Zara's silver eyes seemed to look right through him. "I can speak to any living mind, anywhere in the galaxy, and my words carry power. The Dominion learned that when I speak, armies stop fighting. When I whisper, empires fall." Ben checked his weapon nervously. "Captain, maybe we should be careful." "She's just a girl, Ben," Jake said, though he wasn't entirely sure of that himself. "I am the last of my people," Zara continued. "We were called speakers. We once helped keep peace across the galaxy, but the Dominion destroyed my world because they could not control us. They kept me alive because they wanted to study my abilities." Jake looked at his team. Lisa was fascinated. Amy looked sympathetic and Ben remained suspicious. Jake had to make a choice. Leave this girl in her prison or free her and risk whatever consequences might follow. "Can you get her out of there?" he asked Lisa. "The pod. Systems are complex, but I think so," Lisa replied. "It might take some time." As Lisa worked on the pod controls, Zara spoke again. "Captain, you should know that the Dominion will come looking for me. When they discover I'm gone, they will hunt you across the galaxy. They will destroy your world if necessary to get me back." Jake thought about this. His job was to explore and gather information, not to start wars with alien empires. But looking at this girl floating in her prison, he knew he could not leave. "Her here. We're getting you out," he said. The pod opened with a soft hiss and the liquid drained away. Zara stepped out, somehow completely dry, wearing simple white clothing. She was small and delicate, but there was something in her eyes that spoke of great age and wisdom. "Thank you," she said, and her voice was warm and grateful. "But you should prepare yourselves. The Dominion ships will arrive soon. They always know when someone tries to free their prisoners." As if summoned by her words, Amy's console began beeping urgently. "Captain, I'm detecting hyperspace signatures. Multiple large ships are approaching our position." Jake looked at Zara, who nodded sadly. "The Dominion Third Fleet. They are led by Admiral Marcus Kane, and he has been hunting me for a very long time." "How long do we have?" Jake asked Amy. 10 minutes, maybe less." Jake activated his communicator. "All hands, this is the captain. Return to the ship immediately. We are leaving now." As they ran through the corridors of the alien prison ship, Zara kept pace with them easily despite her apparent youth. "Captain Morrison, you have just made humanity a target of the most powerful empire in the galaxy. Are you prepared for what comes next?" Jake helped her through the airlock onto his ship. "We'll figure it out as we go. That's what humans do." Zara smiled, and for the first time in over 2 centuries, she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. President Robert Taylor sat in the emergency session room deep beneath the White House, staring at the holographic display that showed Admiral Helen Brooks speaking from Earth Defense Command. Around the table sat the most important people in human government, all trying to understand what Captain Morrison had brought to their doorstep. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," President Taylor said slowly. "We have rescued an alien girl who can control minds, and now an entire galactic empire is coming to destroy us to get her back." Admiral Brooks nodded grimly from the hologram. "That's essentially correct, Mr. President. The UNS Horizon arrived 6 hours ago with the alien refugee and a Dominion fleet in pursuit. Captain Morrison estimates we have perhaps 2 days before they reach Earth." General Kevin Wright leaned forward in his chair. He was a big man with gray hair and scars from the Mars Rebellion 20 years earlier. "How many ships are we talking about?" "Initial reports suggest at least 50 vessels, possibly more," Brooks replied. "Each one is larger and more advanced than our biggest battleships." Ambassador Claire Nelson shook her head. She was younger than the others, with short red hair and the kind of intense expression that came from years of diplomatic work. "We should consider surrender. If we return this girl to them, maybe we can avoid a war we cannot win." "Absolutely not," Wright said firmly. "We don't negotiate with slavers and kidnappers. If they want to fight, we'll give them one. President Taylor held up his hand for silence. What does the girl say about all this? Has anyone actually talked to her about what she wants? Captain Morrison is bringing her here now, Brooks replied. She requested to speak directly with Earth's leadership. An hour later, Jake Morrison entered the secure conference room with Zara walking beside him. The alien girl looked even younger and more fragile under the harsh lights of the government facility. She wore simple human clothes that Amy Walsh had found for her, and her silver hair was pulled back in a ponytail that made her look like any teenage girl. But when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of centuries. "President Taylor," she said, looking directly at him with those strange silver eyes. "Thank you for allowing Captain Morrison to bring me here. I know my presence puts your people in great danger." "That's what we're here to discuss," Taylor replied. "These Dominion forces, how serious a threat are they to Earth?" Zara sat down across from him. "The Dominion Empire controls over 1,000 worlds, Mr. President. They have been conquering and enslaving species for 3,000 years. Admiral Kane's fleet is just a small part of their military power." General Wright frowned. "Then why haven't they conquered us already? We've been broadcasting radio signals into space for over a century. Because until now you were not worth their attention," Zara explained. "Humanity is young and your technology is primitive compared to theirs. They saw you as a species they could conquer later, when it was convenient." "And now?" "Ambassador," Nelson asked. "Now you have shown that you will risk everything to help a stranger," Zara said. "That makes you dangerous to them in a way that weapons never could." President Taylor leaned back in his chair. "Explain that." Zara looked around the room at all the human faces watching her. "The Dominion's power comes from making people believe they have no choice but to obey. They conquer a world, kill anyone who resists, and convince the survivors that submission is the only way to survive. But when people see others choosing to fight for what is right, even against impossible odds, it reminds them that they can choose resistance too." "You're talking about inspiring rebellion," Wright said. "I'm talking about awakening conscience," Zara corrected. "Every being in the Dominion Empire was once free. They remember their homeworlds, their families, their cultures. The Dominion tries to make them forget, but the memories are still there." Dr. Lisa Carter, who had come with Captain Morrison, spoke up from her seat near the wall. "We've analyzed her abilities, Mr. President. She can communicate telepathically with any living mind across vast distances. When she spoke to the Dominion fleet, she somehow activated suppressed memories and emotions." "It's not mind control," Zara added quickly. "I cannot make anyone do anything they don't want to do. I can only help them remember who they really are underneath all the fear and conditioning." President Taylor was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he asked, "What do you want from us, Zara? What would you do if we gave you our protection?" Zara's eyes lit up with something that might have been hope. "There is a place called the Nexus at the center of the galaxy. It was built by my people thousands of years ago, before the Dominion existed. If I could reach it, I could speak to every enslaved being in the Empire simultaneously." "And tell them what?" Nelson asked. "The truth," Zara said simply. "That they are not alone. That they don't have to live as slaves. That somewhere in the galaxy, there are people willing to fight for their freedom." Wright was studying tactical displays on his tablet. "This Nexus, I assume it's heavily defended?" "The Dominion built a fortress around it," Zara confirmed. "They use it as their central command station. Getting there would require fighting through the heart of their empire." "Impossible," Nelson said immediately. "We're talking about one small human fleet against thousands of enemy ships." "Not just human ships," Zara said quietly. "If word spread that someone was actually fighting back, other species would join us. The Dominion has many enemies, but they've never had hope before." President Taylor looked around the table at his advisors. "Options? We could evacuate Earth," Nelson suggested. "Send the population to the outer colonies and hope the Dominion doesn't follow." "Running away won't solve anything," Wright countered. "They'll hunt us down eventually. Better to fight now while we can choose the terms." "What about negotiation?" Taylor asked. "Could we convince them to leave us alone if we promise not to interfere with their empire?" Zara shook her head sadly. The Dominion doesn't make deals with species they see as inferior. They will demand total surrender and then they will enslave you anyway. I have seen it happen to dozens of worlds. Captain Morrison, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. Mr. President, I've seen what she can do. When she spoke to that Dominion fleet, hardened soldiers started crying like children. If she can do that to thousands of ships at once, the galaxy would never be the same. Zara finished. But getting to the Nexus would require a sacrifice that I cannot ask of humanity. Many of your people would die. President Taylor stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights beyond. Somewhere out there, 3 billion humans were going about their daily lives, unaware that their future was being decided in this room. How long would we have to prepare? He asked. Admiral Brooks answered from the hologram. If we're going to fight, we need to start mobilizing immediately. Our entire fleet amounts to maybe 200 ships, and most of those are patrol vessels. But we have advantages they don't expect, Wright added. Our technology may be primitive, but it's different from theirs. Our tactics are unpredictable, and if this girl is right about inspiring rebellions, we could change the balance of power in the galaxy, Taylor said, turning back to face them. Zara stood up. President Taylor, I will not ask you to sacrifice your people for me. If you want to surrender me to the Dominion, I will understand. Taylor looked at the young alien girl who had lived through 2 centuries of imprisonment and still believed in hope. He thought about what humanity stood for, what they had always stood for when faced with bullies and tyrants. Ambassador Nelson, draft a message to the Dominion fleet, he said finally. Tell them that Earth grants asylum to political refugees and we will not surrender anyone to their persecutors. Nelson looked shocked. Sir, that's essentially a declaration of war. No, Taylor replied. That's a declaration of principle. General Wright, begin fleet mobilization. Contact all the colonies and tell them what we're facing. Give everyone the choice to fight or evacuate. And if they choose to fight? Wright asked. Taylor looked at Zara, who was smiling for the first time since entering the room. Then we're going to do something that hasn't been tried in 3,000 years. We're going to free the galaxy. As alarms began sounding throughout Earth Defense Command and messages flashed out to human colonies across known space, Zara closed her eyes and sent her own message across the void. It was directed not to human minds, but to the millions of enslaved beings throughout the Dominion Empire. Her whispered words carried a simple message. Hope is coming. Admiral Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the human vessel on his main screen. The ship was small and primitive, barely worth his attention under normal circumstances. But these humans had done something that no one had managed in over 2 centuries. They had freed the speaker. Kane was tall and thin, with gray skin and 4 arms that moved with precise mechanical motions. His species had served the Dominion for 3,000 years, and he had personally conquered 47 worlds. He had never failed a mission, and he did not intend to start now. Human vessel, he broadcast on all frequencies, you have stolen property of the Dominion Empire. Return the prisoner immediately and your deaths will be quick. On the bridge of the UNS Horizon, Jake listened to the alien voice with growing anger. He looked at Zara, who was sitting quietly in a corner chair that Amy had found for her. The girl seemed calm, almost peaceful despite the massive warships surrounding them. This is Captain Morrison of the United Earth Vessel Horizon, Jake replied. We found a person in a prison and set her free. We don't recognize your authority here. Kane's laughter came through the speakers like the sound of breaking glass. Humans, we have studied your species for some time, Captain Morrison. You are new to the galaxy, primitive and weak. Your entire civilization could be destroyed in a matter of days. Maybe, Jake said, but we're not giving you the girl. Then you will die, Kane replied, and his ships opened fire. The horizon shook under the impact of energy weapons that were far more advanced than anything humans had built. Jake held onto his chair as sparks flew from damaged consoles around the bridge. Shields at 60%, Ben reported. They're not trying to destroy us completely. They want us alive. They want me alive, Zara corrected softly. Captain Morrison, may I help you? Jake looked at her. What can you do against an entire fleet? Zara stood up and walked to the center of the bridge. She closed her silver eyes and took a deep breath. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, but somehow everyone on the bridge could hear her clearly. She said something in a language that none of them recognized. The words were beautiful and sad, like a song of mourning. But there was power in them, a force that seemed to reach out beyond the ship and touch something far away. On Kane's flagship, the effects began immediately. The Admiral was preparing to order another attack when his weapons officer suddenly screamed. The alien soldier dropped to his knees, holding his head and crying out in a language Kane had not heard him speak in decades. Commander Thax, what is wrong with you? Kane demanded. But Thax was lost in some kind of waking nightmare. He was speaking the language of his homeworld, the planet Kane had helped conquer 30 years ago. He was calling out names, his parents, his siblings, his children who had been killed when the Dominion invaded. The same thing was happening throughout the fleet. Soldiers who had served the Dominion for years were suddenly remembering their lives before the conquest. They were seeing visions of their destroyed homes, their dead families, their lost worlds. The guilt and pain they had buried for decades came flooding back all at once. On the bridge of one ship, the navigation officer began crying uncontrollably as he remembered the day his people surrendered. On another vessel, the captain himself fell to the floor, overcome by memories of the civilian population he had helped massacre. Kane tried to maintain order, but his own crew was falling apart around him. His communications officer was speaking to ghosts from his past, begging forgiveness from people who had been dead for 50 years. His tactical officer had curled up in a corner, singing a lullaby his mother had taught him before the Dominion killed her. "What is she doing to my fleet?" Kane demanded. But there was no one left to answer him. On the horizon, Jake watched in amazement as the enemy ships began to drift apart. Some were spinning out of control as their crews abandoned their posts. Others had simply stopped moving, entirely. Zara opened her eyes and swayed slightly. Lisa caught her arm to steady her. "I spoke to their hearts," Zara explained quietly. "I reminded them of who they were before the Dominion made them into killers. The truth is often more powerful than any weapon." "You did that to an entire fleet?" Amy asked in wonder. "Every living being has a conscience, even if they have forgotten it," Zara replied. "I simply helped them remember." On Kane's flagship, the Admiral was one of the few still functioning. His species had been serving the Dominion for so long that they had few memories of life before the conquest. But even he could feel something stirring in his mind, old doubts he had pushed aside years ago. "Retreat," he ordered the few crew members, who could still hear him. "All ships retreat to safe distance." The Dominion fleet pulled back, leaving the horizon floating alone in space. Jake could hardly believe what he had witnessed. A teenage girl had defeated an entire battle fleet with nothing but whispered words. "They'll be back," Zara said sadly. "Admiral Kane is strong-willed, and his people have served the Dominion longer than most. The effect won't last forever." "How long do we have?" Jake asked. "A few hours, maybe a day," Zara replied. "Long enough for you to get back to your space and warn your people." Lisa was studying the readings from her instruments. "Zara, what exactly are you? I'm detecting energy patterns I've never seen before." Zara sat down again, looking suddenly very tired. "My people were called speakers. We could communicate with any living mind, anywhere in the galaxy. We were born with this ability and we used it to help resolve conflicts between different species." "What happened to your people?" Amy asked. "The Dominion happened," Zara said, and her voice carried centuries of sadness. "When empires cannot control something, they destroy it. My people tried to make peace between the Dominion and the worlds. They were conquering. We showed their soldiers the truth about what they were doing, just as I did today." "So they killed all of you?" Jake said. "All but me," Zara confirmed. "They kept me alive because they wanted to study our abilities. They thought they could learn to use our power for themselves, but it doesn't work that way. You cannot force empathy. You cannot create conscience where none exists." Ben was monitoring the Dominion ships on his scanners. "Captain, they're regrouping. Whatever she did to them, some of them are recovering." Jake made his decision. "Set course for Earth, maximum speed. Send a priority message to Fleet Command. Tell them we're coming home with important information about a new alien threat." As the Horizon jumped to hyperspace, leaving the Dominion fleet behind, Jake sat down next to Zara. "You know they're going to follow us, don't you? We just painted a target on Earth." Zara nodded. "The Dominion will see humanity as a threat now, not because you are strong, but because you chose to help me when you could have left me in my prison. They fear compassion more than they fear weapons." "Why?" Jake asked. "Because compassion is contagious," Zara explained. "When people see others acting with kindness and courage, they remember that they can choose to do the same. The Dominion's power depends on making people forget they have choices." Lisa looked up from her console. "The fleet is following us, Captain. They're maintaining distance, but they're definitely tracking us." "Let them come," Jake said. "Earth needs to know what's out there, and maybe humanity can help you finish what your people started." Zara looked at him with surprise. "You would risk your entire species for me?" "Not just for you," Jake replied. "For everyone the Dominion has enslaved. You said there are thousands of different species in their empire. If we can help them remember who they are, maybe we can help them become free." Zara smiled, and for the first time in over 2 centuries, she began to believe that her people's dream of galactic peace might still be possible. Humans were young and inexperienced, but they had something the Dominion had tried to destroy everywhere else in the galaxy. They had hope, and they were willing to fight for others even when it put themselves at risk. As the Horizon raced toward Earth with the Dominion fleet in pursuit, Zara began to plan. She had spent 200 years learning about the empire that had destroyed her world. Now, with humanity's help, she might finally have a chance to bring it down. The first attack came at dawn. Admiral Marcus Kane had grown tired of waiting and decided to test human defenses with a small strike force. 20 Dominion ships dropped out of hyperspace near Mars and opened fire on the research stations orbiting the Red Planet. The attack lasted exactly 14 minutes. When it was over, Kane stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The humans had lost 3 stations and 2 patrol ships, but they had also destroyed 6 of his vessels and damaged 8 others. No primitive species had ever inflicted such casualties on Dominion forces. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his tactical officer, one of the few crew members who had fully recovered from Zara's mental attack. "Their weapons are crude but unpredictable," the officer reported. "They use kinetic projectiles mixed with energy weapons in patterns we've never encountered. And their pilots fight like madmen, ramming our ships when their weapons fail." Kane had conquered 47 worlds, but he had never faced an enemy that fought with such desperate courage. The humans seemed to view death in battle as preferable to surrender, which made no tactical sense at all. On Earth, the battle reports reached President Taylor within minutes. The human losses hurt, but General Wright was almost smiling as he reviewed the tactical data. 6-to-1 kill ratio, Wright said with satisfaction. "If we can maintain that rate, we might actually have a chance." The success at Mars was largely due to Commander Steve Adams, who had taken a small fleet of modified civilian ships and hit the Dominion force from an unexpected angle. Steve was young for a ship commander, barely 30, but he had grown up playing war games and thinking about space combat in ways that military academies had never taught. "Their formations are too rigid," Steve reported to Earth Command. "They expect us to fight like every other species they've conquered, but we keep doing things that don't make sense to them." The next innovation came from engineer Tony Mitchell, working in the orbital shipyards above Earth. Tony had studied the wreckage from the Mars battle and noticed something important about Dominion shields. "They're designed to stop energy weapons and high-velocity impacts," he explained to a group of military engineers. "But they're not optimized for the specific frequency ranges our equipment uses. If we modify our shield generators to emit a harmonic resonance..." Within hours, human ships were being retrofitted with Tony's modifications. The new shields couldn't stop Dominion weapons entirely, but they could deflect them much more effectively than before. Dr. Michelle Parker, meanwhile, was working on an even more ambitious project. Michelle had been developing artificial intelligence systems for exploration ships, but she realized the same technology could be adapted for combat. The Dominion relies on predictable tactics because they've been successful for thousands of years, she explained to Admiral Brooks. But if our ships can analyze their patterns in real time and adjust our responses faster than they can adapt, the AI systems Michelle developed weren't sentient, but they were incredibly fast at recognizing patterns and suggesting counter-tactics. Within days of implementation, human pilots were outmaneuvering Dominion ships that should have been far superior. But the real breakthrough came from Captain Ryan Foster, who had been leading guerrilla raids behind enemy lines. Ryan had taken a small fleet of fast ships deep into the outer solar system, where scattered Dominion forces were trying to establish staging areas. "Hit and run," Ryan reported after his third successful ambush. "They spread out to cover more territory, so we hit the isolated groups before they can call for help. They're not used to enemies that won't stand and fight." Each human innovation forced the Dominion to adapt, and each adaptation revealed new weaknesses that clever human engineers and tacticians could exploit. It was becoming clear that while the Dominion had superior technology and numbers, they had grown complacent after millennia of easy victories. Meanwhile, aboard the UNS Horizon, now docked at Earth's primary space station, Zara was preparing for the most dangerous part of her plan. She had been working with Dr. Carter to understand exactly how far her abilities could reach. "The signals are definitely getting stronger," Lisa reported after another test. "When you focus on a specific target, we can measure the telepathic emanations at ranges of up to 50 light-years." "That's not nearly enough," Zara said. "To reach the entire galaxy simultaneously, I need to be at the Nexus, the ancient speaker. Technology there can amplify my voice across millions of star systems." Jake Morrison joined them in the laboratory, carrying reports from the front lines. "The war is spreading," he told them. "Word is getting out that someone is actually fighting the Dominion. We're picking up radio transmissions from rebel groups on at least a dozen worlds." Zara closed her eyes and reached out with her mind, searching for the sources of those transmissions. She found them scattered across the galaxy, small groups of beings who had heard rumors of the human resistance and dared to hope. On the industrial world of Korvax, a group of reptilian workers had sabotaged 3 factories that produced Dominion weapons. On the mining planet Zelnar, soldiers from a dozen different species had mutinied and taken control of their base. Each act of rebellion was small, but together, they represented something the Dominion had not seen in centuries. "It's, working," Zara whispered. "People are remembering that they can fight back." But the news wasn't all good. Admiral Kane had been reinforced by Fleet Admiral Victoria Cross, who commanded one of the Dominion's primary battle fleets. Cross was known throughout the Empire as the Pacifier because of her ruthless efficiency in crushing rebellions. "She has over 300 ships," Jake reported grimly, "and she's not playing games like Kane was. Intelligence reports suggest she's planning a direct assault on Earth." Zara stood up from the medical scanner she had been lying on. "Then we need to move now. Every day we wait, more people die." "The journey to the Nexus will take us through the heart of Dominion space," Jake warned. "Even with our improvements, we're still vastly outnumbered." "Not as outnumbered as you think," Zara said with a small smile. "I've been sending messages to every rebel group I can reach. They're organizing, preparing to strike when we begin our approach to the Nexus." Lisa looked up from her instruments. "Zara, using your abilities on that scale across such distances, what will it do to you?" Zara was quiet for a moment. "My people were not meant to use our gifts for warfare. Speaking to the entire galaxy at once, with enough force to break through the Dominion's conditioning, it will probably kill me." The room fell silent. Jake felt his heart sink as he realized what she was planning. "There has to be another way," he said. "Maybe," Zara replied, "but this is the way that saves the most lives. Captain Morrison, your people have already sacrificed so much for me. I won't ask them to sacrifice more when I can end this myself." Before Jake could argue, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Admiral Brooks's voice came over the intercom. "All hands to battle stations. Long-range sensors detect a massive Dominion fleet approaching the outer system. Estimate arrival in 6 hours. Zara walked to the observation window and looked out, at the blue and white marble of Earth hanging in space below them. Your world is beautiful, Captain Morrison. I understand now why humans fight so hard to protect it. Jake joined her at the window. We're not just fighting for Earth anymore. We're fighting for everyone the Dominion has enslaved. Including me, Zara said softly. For the first time in over 2 centuries, I feel truly free. That's worth any sacrifice. As human ships across the solar system prepared for the largest space battle in their history, Zara closed her eyes and sent one final message to the rebel groups scattered across the galaxy. It was time to coordinate their uprising with humanity's desperate gamble. The message was simple. The speaker remembers. The speaker is coming home. Across 1,000 worlds, enslaved beings looked up at the stars and prepared to fight for their freedom. The Dominion Empire, which had seemed unshakable for 3 millennia, was about to discover that some things were more powerful than fear. Hope, it turned out, was contagious. And once it began to spread, even the mightiest empire could not contain it. The battle for Earth lasted 18 hours and changed the galaxy forever. Fleet Admiral Victoria Cross brought 400 ships against the 150 vessels humanity could muster. By every tactical calculation, the fight should have been over in minutes. Instead, it became the largest space battle in recorded history and the beginning of the end for the Dominion Empire. The human fleet was commanded by Admiral Helen Brooks from her flagship, the newly commissioned UNS Liberty. Brooks had grown up reading about ancient naval battles on Earth's oceans, and she applied those lessons to 3-dimensional space combat in ways that confused and frustrated the Dominion commanders. Concentrate all fire on their command ships, Brooks ordered as the battle began. If we can disrupt their coordination, their numerical advantage becomes meaningless. The human ships fought with a desperation and creativity that the Dominion had never encountered. Captain Ryan Foster led a squadron of converted cargo haulers in suicide runs against Dominion dreadnoughts, using the larger ship's own mass against them. Commander Steve Adams coordinated hit-and-run attacks that appeared to come from empty space, only to vanish before the enemy could respond. But the real turning point came when other species began arriving to help. Thek the reptilian appeared, first, leading a fleet of ships that had been hidden in the asteroid belt for decades. His people had been enslaved 50 years earlier, but they had never stopped preparing for a chance to fight back. We heard the speaker's call, Thek announced on the human communication frequencies. We come to honor the debt we owe to those who chose to help a stranger. Behind Thek came ships from a dozen other species, energy beings whose vessels looked like living crystals, insectoid warriors in ships that moved like metal wasps, and even a few rogue Dominion units whose crews had mutinied and joined the rebellion. Admiral Cross found herself facing not just human ingenuity, but a coalition of species that fought with the fury of the long-oppressed, finally given hope. This is impossible, she raged at her tactical officers. Primitive species don't coordinate like this. They don't sacrifice themselves for strangers. But humans did, and apparently their courage was contagious. While the battle raged around Earth, the UNS Horizon slipped away through the chaos. Jake Morrison commanded a small fleet of 12 ships carrying Zara toward the center of the galaxy. They had to reach the Nexus while the Dominion's attention was focused on the battle. The journey took them through star systems, where rebellion was spreading like wildfire. On every world they passed, the signs were clear. Sabotaged factories, mutinous military units, civilian populations rising against their oppressors. Your people started something incredible, Zara told Jake as they watched a Dominion garrison surrender to rebel forces on a mining world. 3,000 years of empire, and it's coming apart because humans decided to do the right thing. We had help, Jake replied. We had you. The closer they got to the galactic center, the heavier the Dominion resistance became. Admiral Kane had been recalled from Earth and was now leading the defense of the Nexus with everything the Empire could spare. The final approach was a nightmare of overlapping energy fields and defensive positions. Kane had surrounded the ancient, Speaker facility with weapons platforms, minefields, and patrol fleets. Getting through would require running a gauntlet that should have been impossible. But the rebellion had reached even here. As Jake's fleet began its final attack run, Dominion ships throughout the defensive grid began turning on each other. Crews that had served the Empire for decades suddenly remembered their true allegiances and opened fire on their former comrades. Conditioning is breaking down everywhere, Dr. Carter reported from her sensor station. Zara's influence is affecting every telepathic species in the Empire. The battle for the Nexus was brutal and personal. Kane himself led the final defense, his flagship engaging the horizon in single combat while the rest of Jake's fleet fought to clear a path to the speaker facility. "You have destroyed everything I spent my life building," Kane accused over the communication link as their ships exchanged fire. "We've given people back their choices," Jake replied. "If that destroys your empire, maybe it deserved to fall." Kane's ship was larger and more powerful, but Jake's crew had learned to fight with the desperate creativity that had become humanity's trademark. Ben Rodriguez found a way to use their modified shields as weapons, while Amy Walsh hacked into the Dominion ship's communication systems and flooded them with recordings of Zara's voice. The effect on Kane's crew was immediate. Soldiers who had followed orders without question for decades suddenly found themselves unable to fire on the humans who had freed the speaker. Kane fought alone on his bridge as his own crew abandoned their posts, overcome by suppressed memories and awakened consciences. In the end, he was just one alien standing against the combined hope of a galaxy. The horizon reached the Nexus as Kane's ship exploded behind them. The ancient speaker facility was a thing of beauty, crystalline spires that seemed to grow out of the space station like living things. Zara gasped when she saw it. "It's exactly as my grandmother described it," she whispered. "The last gift of my people to the galaxy." Getting inside required fighting through the remaining defenses, and they lost 4 ships in the process. Dr. Carter was killed when a Dominion patrol craft rammed their shuttle, giving her life to ensure Zara reached the central chamber. "She believed in what we're doing," Jake told Zara as they stood before the speaker amplification device. "Make sure her sacrifice means something." Zara nodded and approached the ancient machinery. The device activated at her touch, recognizing her as one of the last of its builders. Energy began flowing through crystalline conduits that had been dormant for centuries. "This will reach every living mind in the galaxy," Zara said, placing her hands on the control interface. "But Jake, you should know using this much power for this long, I won't survive it." Jake wanted to argue to find another way, but he could see the determination in her silver eyes. She had waited 200 years for this moment. "What will you tell them?" he asked. Zara smiled. "The truth, that they're not alone anymore." She closed her eyes and began to speak, her voice amplified by ancient technology and broadcast across the galaxy. But she didn't speak in words that could be translated. Instead, she shared feelings, memories of freedom, images of home worlds before the conquest, the simple knowledge that somewhere in the galaxy, people were willing to fight for strangers. The effect was instantaneous and devastating to the Dominion. On 1,000 worlds, enslaved populations rose in coordinated rebellion. Dominion soldiers laid down their weapons as they remembered their true homes. Government officials who had served the Empire for generations suddenly found themselves unable to give orders that perpetuated suffering. The Dominion Empire didn't fall in a single moment. It simply stopped functioning as the beings within it remembered who they had been before fear made them slaves. Zara collapsed after maintaining the transmission for nearly an hour. Jake caught her as she fell, and for a moment, her silver eyes focused on his face. "Did it work?" she whispered. Jake looked at the screens around them, showing reports from across the galaxy. Everywhere, the same story was repeating. Rebellion, liberation, the return of hope to species that had forgotten what freedom meant. "It worked," he told her. "The galaxy is free." Zara smiled one final time and closed her eyes. The last speaker had given her voice to save the galaxy, and her whispered words of hope would echo for generations. 6 months later, Jake Morrison stood before the newly formed Galactic Liberation Council, representing Earth at a gathering of free worlds that would have been impossible to imagine a year earlier. The former Dominion Empire had fragmented into hundreds of independent systems, each working to rebuild what had been lost during the long years of oppression. There were still problems to solve, conflicts to resolve, and wounded species to heal. But now there was hope, and there were people willing to work together to make things better. In the end, that was what humanity had brought to the galaxy, not superior technology or unstoppable weapons, but the simple idea that people should help each other, even when it was dangerous to do so. Zara's sacrifice had freed the galaxy, but it was humanity's example that would keep it free. The girl who could speak to any mind across the universe had whispered her final message, and the armies of oppression had indeed trembled and fallen. The age of the Dominion was over. The age of freedom had begun.